Adam Winton's life seemed perfect on the surface. As the CEO of a thriving tech company, he had wealth, influence, and a name that carried weight. Yet, behind the grandeur of the Winton estate, Adam's life was dictated by his mother, Eleanor Winton, a woman whose ambition left no room for compromise. Eleanor believed that the Winton name was not just a legacy, but a monument to be preserved at all costs. And Clara, a self-made artist from humble beginnings, was not part of that vision. Eleanor's disdain for Clara became more pronounced when the couple struggled to have children. She saw it as a personal affront, a failure that threatened the continuity of the Winton lineage. "She's barren, Adam," Eleanor said coldly one morning, her words cutting like glass. "Do you understand what that means for this family, for our name? It's time to end this charade before it costs you everything." Adam's love for Clara was genuine, but the weight of his mother's expectations was suffocating. He tried to resist, arguing that their marriage was built on love, not duty. But Eleanor's relentless manipulation, coupled with her icy pragmatism, eroded his resolve. Eventually, he gave in, convincing himself it was the only way to protect the family legacy. The day Clara left the Winton estate was etched in Adam's memory. It was raining, the sky mirroring the despair that gripped his heart. Clara stood at the door, her suitcase in hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "Tell me why, Adam," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" Adam couldn't bring himself to meet her gaze. "This isn't working," he said, his voice hollow. "It's better this way." The lie burned on his tongue, but he swallowed it, watching helplessly as Clara walked away, the sound of her footsteps fading into the storm. That evening, under the cover of a relentless rainstorm, Alina left the Allen mansion with a single suitcase in hand. She paused at the end of the driveway, her thin coat doing little to shield her from the elements. Turning back, she looked at the grand estate one last time, her voice trembling as she whispered, "If this is what you call right, then you've lost far more than just me, Victor." In the aftermath, Eleanor wasted no time orchestrating Adam's future. She introduced him to Evelyn, the daughter of a prominent businessman whose family connections promised to elevate the Wintons even further. Evelyn was poised, elegant, and everything Eleanor thought a Winton wife should be. Within months, Adam and Evelyn were married, their union celebrated with grandiosity that masked its emptiness. Evelyn gave birth to Sophie a year later, a bright and curious little girl. But even Sophie couldn't meet Eleanor's expectations. "A daughter," Eleanor said with a thin smile, her disappointment barely veiled. "Well, at least she's beautiful." Evelyn's frustration with the Winton household grew with each passing year. The cold, calculated atmosphere of the estate suffocated her. Adam, consumed by work and his mother's demands, barely acknowledged the emotional distance growing between them. Evelyn realized she and Sophie were merely pawns in Eleanor's game to maintain the family image. One evening, after yet another argument with Adam about his indifference, Evelyn made a decision. "I'm leaving Adam," she said, her voice steady but resolute. "I'm taking Sophie, and we're starting over." Adam stared at her, stunned. "Evelyn, wait." "No," she interrupted, her tone firm. "You've let Eleanor control everything, including this marriage. I won't let her dictate Sophie's life, too." The next morning, Evelyn packed their belongings and left the Winton estate. Adam watched helplessly as the car carrying his wife and daughter disappeared down the long driveway. The emptiness that followed was unbearable, but he couldn't deny the truth. He had driven them away just as he had Clara. The day Clara stepped off the train in the city, she felt a mix of fear and determination. The towering buildings and bustling streets seemed overwhelming, but they also represented a fresh start. With little more than a small suitcase and the resilience she'd built from her heartbreak, Clara resolved to create a life she and her unborn children could be proud of. She found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, its peeling wallpaper and creaky floors a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Winton estate. Yet, it was hers, a place where she could begin again. Clara took a job at a local bakery, working long hours to make ends meet. The routine was exhausting, but the rhythmic hum of the kitchen provided a sense of stability she desperately needed. It wasn't long before Clara realized she was pregnant. The discovery came with a whirlwind of emotions: fear, joy, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She spent sleepless nights worrying about how she would provide for her children, but the thought of holding them in her arms gave her strength. Clara's nights were filled with quiet determination, knitting tiny sweaters for her babies and hunting for secondhand cribs at thrift stores. Despite the challenges, each small act strengthened her resolve to build a loving home for her daughters. One evening, while working at the bakery, Clara met Jacob. He was a pediatrician who frequented the shop after his shifts at the nearby clinic. Jacob's warm smile and easy demeanor stood out in Clara's otherwise hectic days. At first, their conversations were brief and polite, exchanges about coffee preferences and the weather. But over time, their interactions deepened. Jacob noticed Clara's growing belly and asked gently, "How are you holding up?" Clara hesitated, then smiled softly. "I'm managing. It's not easy, but I'll figure it out." Jacob nodded, his expression thoughtful. "If you ever need help, don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes it takes a village." Clara appreciated his kindness but remained guarded. She had built walls around her heart, determined not to let anyone else in after what she had endured. Months later, on a cold April morning, Clara gave birth to twin girls, Lily and Lila. The labor was long and painful, but the moment she heard their first cries, every hardship she had faced seemed worth it. Holding the two tiny, identical faces in her arms, Clara felt a love so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "You're my everything," she whispered to them, her voice trembling. "I'll protect you, no matter what." Life as a single mother was challenging. Sleepless nights, endless bottles, and the constant hum of exhaustion tested Clara's limits. Yet the laughter of her daughters and their bright, curious eyes gave her strength. Lily and Lila became her anchor, the reason she pushed through every hardship. Jacob became more than just a customer. On days when Clara looked especially tired, he would offer to help close the shop or entertain Lily and Lila with stories about his work at the clinic. His steady presence wasn't just a comfort. It became a lifeline for Clara, reminding her she wasn't alone. One evening, as the girls slept peacefully in their cribs, Clara sat across from Jacob in her small living room. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Jacob asked, surprised. "For being here," she replied, her voice soft but sincere. "For caring, even when I didn't ask you to." Jacob smiled, leaning forward slightly. "Clara, you don't have to do this alone. You're strong, but even the strongest people deserve someone in their corner." Clara didn't respond immediately. She looked at her daughters, then back at Jacob, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. Not just for her daughters, but for herself. 7 years after Clara left the Winton estate, Adam found himself in a city far removed from the world he knew. Business had brought him here, a series of investor meetings and corporate deals, but he couldn't shake the sense of monotony that had overtaken his life. His days were filled with boardrooms and cold conversations, his nights with a deafening emptiness he couldn't explain. One afternoon, Adam wandered through a local park, seeking a brief escape from his schedule. The laughter of children filled the air, punctuated by the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. It was a stark contrast to the calculated silence of the Winton estate, and for a moment, Adam felt a strange sense of calm. As he approached a playground, a familiar figure caught his eye. A woman knelt by two young girls, helping them tie their shoelaces. Her laughter, warm and unguarded, reached him before her face turned. It was Clara. Adam froze mid-step, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't seen her in 7 years, yet time hadn't dulled the sharp edges of his memories. His gaze shifted to the two girls. They were identical, their sandy brown hair catching the sunlight, their bright eyes reflecting the joy of childhood. and they looked just like him. Adam's heart thudded painfully in his chest, a mix of disbelief and regret washing over him. His mind raced with questions. Were they his daughters? Why hadn't Clara told him? The weight of his absence pressed down on him as he realized just how much he had missed in their lives. He stepped closer, his polished shoes incongruous against the worn pavement of the park. Clara looked up then, her smile faltering as her eyes met his. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Adam," she said finally, her voice steady but guarded. "Clara?" he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. His gaze flickered to the girls who were now watching curiously. "Are they?" Clara straightened, her protective instincts kicking in as she moved to shield the girls with her body. "They're my daughters," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Adam's chest tightened. "And mine?" he asked, the words tasting foreign, yet undeniable. Clara's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing. "You lost the right to ask that question when you let me walk away, Adam." The weight of her words hit him like a blow. He wanted to respond, to explain, but the years of silence and missed moments hung between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Clara took Lily and Lila's hands and turned away, leaving Adam rooted to the spot, watching as the family he could have had walked out of sight. The image of Clara and the girls lingered in his mind long after he left the park. Their laughter echoed in his ears, a stark reminder of what he had lost. That night, Adam sat in his hotel room, staring at the city lights, unable to shake the gnawing questions in his mind. He had to know, were they really his daughters? And if they were, could he ever make amends? Adam couldn't leave the city without answers. The encounter at the park had shaken him to his core, and he needed to know the truth. After hiring a private investigator to confirm his suspicions, Adam learned that Lily and Lila were indeed his daughters. The knowledge brought an avalanche of guilt and regret that threatened to overwhelm him. The next day, Adam walked into the bakery where Clara worked. The warm smell of bread and pastries did little to calm the storm inside him. Clara stood behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour, chatting with a customer. She glanced up as Adam entered, her expression hardening instantly. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, her voice low but firm as she stepped away from the counter. Adam hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I know, Clara. I know they're mine." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line and her eyes narrowed. "It took you 7 years to care enough to find out?" she shot back. The sharpness in her voice made Adam flinch. "I didn't know," he admitted, his tone soft. "If I had—" "You would have what?" Clara interrupted, stepping closer. "Claimed them as part of your legacy? Dragged them into the toxic mess that is your family?" Before Adam could respond, a familiar voice broke the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Jacob appeared from the back of the bakery, his presence steady and protective. Clara exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Get out," she said, her gaze cutting back to him. Adam ignored the dismissal and looked at Jacob. "I just want to know my daughters," he said earnestly. Jacob crossed his arms, his voice calm but firm. "Knowing them starts with respecting their mother, and I don't see much of that here. Clara has carried the weight of raising Lily and Lila alone, while you, what, let your mother dictate your life?" Adam's face tightened at the accusation, but he said nothing. Clara stepped in before the situation could escalate further. "Jacob's right," she said coldly. "You don't get to disrupt our lives just because you feel guilty now." She glanced at Jacob, who placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "If you really want to be in their lives, Adam, you'll have to prove it," Clara added, her tone unwavering. "But not on your terms, on mine." Adam's shoulders slumped as the weight of her words settled over him. Years of regret bubbled to the surface, but so did a flicker of hope, a chance to mend what he had broken. He met her gaze, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I'll do whatever it takes." Clara sat at the small table in her apartment, watching Lily and Lila giggle as they played with the puzzle. The evening sunlight cast a golden glow through the curtains, and for a moment, the chaos of the past few days felt distant. Across from her, Jacob quietly sipped his coffee, his calm presence a steady anchor amidst the storm Adam's return had brought. Earlier that day, Clara had met Adam again at the park, this time without the girls. She had made her position clear. "If you want to be part of Lily and Lila's lives, it will be on my terms," she said firmly. "They are not just an extension of the Winton name, and I won't let them be hurt by your family's expectations." Adam had nodded, his gaze heavy with regret. "I just want to know them, Clara. I've made so many mistakes, but I want to do this right. If you'll let me." Clara's resolve wavered slightly, but she held her ground. "You can visit," she conceded. "Supervised at first, but if I see anything that threatens their happiness, this ends immediately." That evening, Clara shared her decision with Jacob. He listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I trust you to protect them, Clara," Jacob said gently, "and I'll be here to help, no matter what happens." Clara smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. "You've done more than just help, Jacob. You've been their father in every way that matters." Jacob's eyes softened and he took a deep breath. "Then let me make it official," he said. "Clara, I love you. I love Lily and Lila. I want to be with you, always." Clara's breath hitched as tears welled in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, Jacob." The months that followed were a mix of challenges and healing. Adam slowly began to build a relationship with Lily and Lila, visiting regularly and making an effort to respect Clara's boundaries. Meanwhile, Clara and Jacob planned their wedding, creating a new chapter for their family. On a warm summer evening, beneath a canopy of twinkling lights, Clara and Jacob exchanged vows in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by loved ones. Lily and Lila ran around the garden in matching dresses, their laughter filling the air. From a distance, Adam watched the scene with a bittersweet smile. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but seeing Clara and the girls happy gave him a sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Hope that in some way, he could still be part of their lives, even if from afar. The Winton estate stood as it always had, grand, imposing, and meticulously maintained. Its towering columns and sprawling gardens were the hallmarks of an empire built on wealth and reputation. But within its walls, the air was thick with silence. The laughter that once echoed through its halls had vanished, leaving only the ticking of a grandfather clock to mark the passing hours. Eleanor Winton sat alone in the ornate parlor, a place once alive with gatherings and celebrations. The fire crackled faintly in the hearth, but its warmth failed to reach her. Her sharp gaze drifted to the family portrait above the mantel where a younger Adam stood beside her, his expression one of subdued determination. Beside him was Ellen, poised and elegant, holding their infant daughter Sophie. Yet the memory of that perfect image was now marred by the reality of their fractured family. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair as the weight of her choices pressed down on her. She had orchestrated everything: Adam's marriage to Evelyn, the relentless pursuit of legacy. But in her pursuit of control, she had driven them all away. Evelyn had left with Sophie, determined to shield her daughter from the suffocating expectations of the Winton name. Adam, too, had begun to carve his own path, standing up to Eleanor in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time in years, Eleanor allowed herself to reflect. The cost of her ambition wasn't measured in dollars or estates, but in the lives she had alienated. She had lost the family she claimed to protect, and now the echoes of her empire felt hollow, a monument to a legacy no one wanted to inherit. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across the city, life was anything but quiet. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air as Lily and Lila darted through the living room, giggling as they chased each other. Clara watched them with a smile, her heart full in a way she hadn't thought possible. "Careful, girls," Jacob called from the kitchen, where he was stirring a pot of soup. His voice carried warmth and ease, a far cry from the rigid tones of the Winton household. Clara leaned against the doorway, her gaze soft as she took in the scene. The apartment wasn't much. Its walls bore signs of age, and the furniture was mismatched. But it was a home built on love and shared purpose. Every corner held a story. The small table where Lily and Lila had painted their first pictures, the worn couch where the four of them had spent countless evenings watching movies. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara joined Jacob and the girls at the table. They shared stories of their day, the room filled with laughter and the clinking of plates. After dinner, Jacob helped the girls into their pajamas, reading them a story as Clara tidied up. When the apartment finally grew quiet, Clara stepped onto the small balcony, a cup of tea in her hands. Jacob joined her, his arms slipping around her waist as they gazed at the twinkling city lights. "We've come a long way," Jacob said softly, his voice filled with pride. Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We have," she replied, "and we're only just beginning." Back at the Winton estate, Eleanor sat in her empty parlor, the distant city lights visible through the massive windows. For the first time, she felt the weight of true solitude. Her wealth and influence had built walls around her, but they had also left her isolated. In contrast, Clara's life, though modest, was filled with warmth and connection. Lily and Lila thrived in the love of their mother and Jacob, their laughter a constant reminder of resilience and joy. What the Winton legacy had failed to provide, Clara's little family had created. A foundation not of power, but of hope, built brick by brick with love. As the stars shimmered above the city, Clara and Jacob held each other close, knowing that their future, though simple, was bright. And in the quiet of her grand estate, Eleanor Winton finally understood the truth she had refused to see. Wealth could build an empire, but only love could build a home. As the gentle glow of the evening surrounded them, Clara, Jacob, Lily, and Lila sat together, their laughter and smiles filling the air. They had faced challenges, endured loss, and navigated their way toward true happiness. Every step of their journey was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and hope. Just like this story, our lives are filled with trials and moments of despair, but they also hold endless opportunities to rediscover joy and build something meaningful. If you found yourself resonating with Clara's determination, Adam's regret, or Jacob's unwavering support, leave your mark by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for taking the time to experience today's story with us. We look forward to seeing you in our next videos, where love, hope, and kindness will continue to connect us all.